every book we read, I say is my new favorite. I can find something to love in a lot of things.
I'm more like hard to please, I guess.
Books and Brunch with Amber.
Hi. Welcome to Books and Brunch. I'm Noelle.
I'm Amber.
And today we are talking about The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland.
Yes, and I will say to start off, this was my favorite of all the books we've done so far.
This book was amazing. It was, oh my gosh, just alone. What did it cover? How many? 200 years?
The book started in the 1800s, goes to the 1980s.
Just a quick synopsis of the book. If you've seen it, if you're thinking about it, if you're just going to listen to this to get to dip your toes in, it is no secret that this is a vampire book, but it's a non-traditional vampire book. So what I would say is if you like books that have an interesting take on vampirism, like Let the Right One In. We talked about Vampires in the Lemon Grove, the short story. It's non-traditional vampires, and this is definitely, absolutely, 100% not a romance.
Yeah. Think less Twilight, less Buffy, more Interview with the Vampire.
There are times where it reads like a confession, where she is laying her regrets and her pains out, and you as the reader are like, oh my god, she's been through a lot.
Yeah. It's so beautifully written, and then the way it moves through time, and it focuses a lot on different relationships, and it's not at all cheesy. A lot of vampire books can be very cheesy, and it's not at all.
It's very human. It's like that thing where they humanize a monster. You find yourself sympathizing. You find the monsters sympathizing with horrible humans.
And even the vampire, the rules of being a vampire are the typical ones, they can't go in the sun or things like that. They don't age.
Mm-hmm.
All of that normal kind of lore, all of that's different too.
Yeah, super different. And also, I think what's cool is that in the vampires in this world can age to a certain point, almost to their physical peak perfection. Okay,
let's just give a brief synopsis.
Okay, so a woman growing up in the 1870s in America lives in a village where everyone is dying of tuberculosis. That woman's grandfather gives her an escape from the death, the destruction, but it came at a price. From there, she travels the world. She goes to Europe, she goes to the Middle East, back to America, and essentially the book takes place present day in the 1980s in New York, and it's a woman running a children's private French academy.
Preschool.
She's providing education, companionship. She cares about these kids, and her clients are wealthy New Englanders.
And every other chapter goes from present day, and then it goes to past, and the past ones work their way from her childhood up through, close to present day.
And you kind of learn about all the different important people in her life. What's cool about this book, though, is there's a lot of Slavic mythology. So there's kind of old deities and myths and superstitions kind of woven in, because that's in her childhood was kind of ingrained in her, was that Slavic culture, and it follows her through to the present day, and that I think that's a really important kind of consistent theme.
Okay, so about the author, you had picked this book, so you were tasked with researching the author. I did watch a few interviews, and so if I learned anything that you are not saying, I will add it. But good,
it's balanced.
You may proceed.
That's what friendship's for. Jacqueline Holland got her MFA from the University of Kansas. Her short stories have appeared in literary journals like Hotel America, Big Fiction Magazine, a lot of big name publications. She's taught English and writing in Egypt, in Honduras, at the University of Kansas, Yeah. The God of Endings is her first novel, which, holy shit, that's a huge first novel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible.
NPR described The God of Endings as, quote, heartbreaking, gorgeously written, even in its darkest passages, and truly epic in terms of breadth and scope. And I could not agree more. That's like the perfect way to describe this. Like, she took on such a big vision, and never once was I like, well, this chapter doesn't seem necessary. She did an interview at the Los Angeles Public Library. They kind of were asking her for inspiration for the premise of the book. She actually said that she was walking, and of course, we've talked about this. There's a lot of inspiration from the book that she pulled from. But in this particular moment, she explained she was walking and she thought to herself, what would you do with your time if you were never going to die? How would you pass the time, and how would it feel? And I love that. Obviously, this character took her a long time to figure out what things made her happy. And she always knew it was art, right? But there's also this interesting thing about caring for children.
The video that I watched when she was talking about her inspiration, she was saying, she was this, new mother and had a baby. And she said it very eloquently, but basically you have this raw human that you're in charge of taking care of and teaching, and she just felt so inadequate and like she was gonna ruin this person. And then just kind of like the depression and the different things that come with exhaustion and being a new mom, and a lot of that is what inspired her. And so I think that's where the children in the book come into play. And even though she feels like she's a monster, she also is able to help these children.
It kind of was a perfect book to read right after Night Bitch, because it's this idea of how much badness makes you a bad person, or how many mistakes makes you a bad mother. That's a very compelling part of a novel, is when it's not so easy to hate someone and to like someone, that there's always tension.
Did you see anywhere how long she worked on it?
It took her 6 years and 80 Word documents to write. It began as a novella that she wrote in her first year at grad school. She got feedback from peers during workshops, and later she added to the story until eventually 6 years later, it became what it is now. If you follow us on Instagram, it's at Books and Brunch Cast. You will find the recipe. Chocolate croissants. If you've been to a French bakery or French cafe, they've always got those there. And I wanted to do something French. I didn't want to do something. We've had a lot of blood-themed books. We had Bones and All. We did a Bloody Mary for. We had Night Bitch, which we did like a rare steak. And I just kind of wanted this to have a little bit of, I wanted it to be more French, because that was kind of one of my favorite components of the book.
If I lived in France, I would be 800 pounds.
No, I don't think so. And not to get political, but like, they don't add all the crazy shit chemicals to their bread that we do that make us fat. So I actually think we'd be
I just
very
makes it
thin.
Taste so good.
Okay.
So much.
So much of it.
Yeah.
Have you been to Louisiana?
No.
So in New Orleans, they have some little French cafes. Beignets is like, you know how in New Mexico they do puffed fried dough and they'll put honey on it?
We call that a sopapilla.
So it's like a sopapilla, but instead of the honey on it, it's a little more dense, and they're like little squares of puffed fried dough, and they've got powdered sugar on it. Café du Monde. But yeah.
Did you finish talking about your recipe?
No, because the blood component, the macabre component that makes it fun is that to make a little raspberry sauce to kind of drizzle on top of it, looking like blood drizzled on your little chocolate cakes.
Nice. So the drink idea is just a bottle of wine that you buy. This was my favorite red wine, and I thought it would be perfect for this book because they talk about wine multiple times. So in the present day, in the 80s, the Leo's mom drinks a lot of wine, and then when she's living in France, you know, they drink wine.
Well, Catherine,
so I thought,
in Catherine's defense, she has to wash down her pills with something.
I didn't add that. But so it's Apothic Red Winemaker's Blend. All the Apothic Reds I like. Not just because they have an A for amber on them.
Sure. Here's the question.
So serious.
Why do we love vampires? And like, why has it always been cool? Why does it keep being cool? Why is it something that can be redone a million times? And Jacqueline Holland said the following about vampires. She says, they're the most emo of the fictional monsters and also the most human. She talks about the way we relate to them by relating to hunger, or more specifically, spoilers, addiction, because we've got characters like Catherine, who is addicted to pills and is also kind of addicted to her own narcissism. And it's when Colette / Anya makes this connection. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm literally addicted to blood, to hunger, to this like thirst. And how is that different?
And I think also because they're normally like pretty hot.
That's not, have you ever watched Nosferatu? Not a hot vampire.
No.
Super not hot. Now,
I watched Interview with the Vampire and Twilight.
My favorite vampire film is Byzantium.
What is that?
The most gorgeous vampire film in the world.
I have to show you what I bought.
Okay.
This just happens to be sitting here. Okay, you see, it's a pen. Okay, and you can't really see in the camera, but this is Jacob, and then when you turn it, his shirt comes off.
Question though, if you were to have relations with Jacob, would it be bestiality?
It depends on which form he's in.
Wolves are kind
But
of...
he was also like a teenager, so that's like
pedophilia?
Wrong on
a million levels.
Yeah.
About one reason why we always return to vampires, and it's the same reason why I think we're never not fascinated by witches also, is because there's like actual history of either paranoia of them or actual existences of them. And so Jacqueline Holland was actually in an interview with Barnes & Noble, and she was talking about her inspiration for that very first part of Anya's life. She discovered the New England vampire panic of the 1950s and was part of her building her character's history. There's always been a fear of vampirism. Like, think about in Anya's childhood when you've got people dying of an actual disease, tuberculosis, but people are like, yeah, it's vampires. They didn't know about germs.
In the 1700s was a big vampire fear, and so this was all right before the French Revolution, right before Marie Antoinette and all of that. And so I think it kind of gets looked over because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they didn't know about germs and the things that they would do to people's graves to make sure they didn't come back as vampires. And they did it was kind of like the Salem witch trials where they did massive executions of all these people because they thought they were vampires.
Yep.
That idea of vampires, I don't know when it first started. I mean, Dracula was written, when was that? It's been around for hundreds of years. You gotta wonder, are they maybe real? Because it's been around for a long time.
I'd like to
mermaids.
believe. Yeah. So here's a cool thing too. Jacqueline Holland was asked what she hopes readers would take away from reading her novel, The God of Endings. And this is what she says. Quote, If readers just have a plain old good time in the process of reading my book, I'll be overjoyed. I believe strongly that reading should be pleasurable. In my hubris, I like to think that my novel is thoughtful and even philosophical, but it's also a bloody, violent vampire novel, and I really hope that it's fun and absorbing, perhaps even a little scary. And I love that. I think sometimes when people are trying too hard to share with you some like deeper meaning, some deeper philosophy, they want you to take something away from it, it feels preachy.
It's like, who am I to try to tell someone a deeper meaning that, you know.
Right. But I also think in the other, sometimes we feel we just have stories in us and we need to tell them. Jacqueline Holland had something to say, and without trying and being really like heavy-handed, I mean, I had a lot of feels.
Where she expressed the character understanding and recognizing the bad things she's done, but that's not all the book is about. It's not just like rambling of self-loathing for hundreds of pages.
Well, and in true woman fashion, despite the fact that she absolutely hates herself and she's very self-critical and she's super depressed and needs a therapist, she continues to help people and to care about people and to enrich the lives of people around her. I mean, she was killing Nazis. Like, she was raising children she was raising Jewish children at a time when they were essentially being hunted and their parents fled the country. She did a lot of amazing things that she did not have to, and she didn't do them as penance. She didn't do them to try to make up for the fact that she was a vampire. She just did them because she cared about people.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I missed it or if it's not in there, but did she have sex with Paul?
She didn't have the parts. She doesn't have those parts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was so weird.
I loved that. And I have to say, the way that she experienced love, romance, and sexuality was the most relatable thing to me. Like, she loved the closeness.
No,
she loved
how
like
sad.
laying with Paul.
That's so sad. At the end, so again, spoilers, you know, she turns Leo.
Well,
and she decides to go and live with her own kind. And so there was not romance in this one.
Thank
I mean,
God.
Paul
was sweet.
Like
Paul was sweet.
Like that could have been romance maybe.
Know who
Which
I loved? Vano.
Yeah.
Bless.
And so, but I'm like, both of them. Why didn't she turn them?
Loved
and like Paul,
Rose.
like why didn't she turn him?
Such great characters. Was she or Hala? Is that am I
That
saying
made
her
me
name?
mad.
She
Yeah.
How could she have known? And also, she hated immortality. So to her, it wasn't giving a gift. And obviously, she has to reconcile that in the end. Is like Hala's ghost comes to her and says, "To you, it's nothing forever. To me, it's everything forever." And her realizing, like, I can't just assume.
Oh, that made me so mad. I was like, she's right there. You can fix it. Just fix it. And I get why the author did that. Like, I get it in the grand scheme of the story and everything. Mm-hmm. But I was like,
because that helps justify her turning Leo. She was.
No, I get why she did it, but I was still just like, and then end with Paul too. But no, a second book where she goes and she now meets, because she's never lived amongst her own kind, so now she lives amongst them and she's raising Leo, and then she falls in love.
Something terrible's got to happen. No. There was one part that I think of a lot. She starts thinking about what if she basically tied herself to a weight and sunk to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
And she imagined her skin disintegrating and wondered, if she can't die, would her consciousness just be in tiny fractions floating around the ocean? Or would she divide into so many pieces that she becomes the ocean itself? And I was like, fuck yes, I love this.
When I read the majority of this book, we had went to Idaho to visit some friends. They had a cabin on a lake. You could only get to it by a boat. Here I am reading about her when they drop her off as a child, and she's living in this cabin in the middle of nowhere, and this cabin was like surrounded by woods right on the lake, and it was so awesome.
You were like,
felt like I was kind of, yeah, it was this cabin that was built in 1908, and the kitchen still was like all from the 50s, and it was just very old.
Question.
And
was there an old woman named Peroska who was making you
yes!
stew? Remember I was saying that everything she wrote was very intentional, the back and the forth, all the different parts of her life. The whole time after that very beginning, I wanted Eru to come back into the story, you know, and a couple times like,
see, book 2.
Well, okay, so do you remember when Eru does come back briefly?
Yeah, she sees him on the TV.
Yes.
And he's like he's like speaking for the people.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if the baby had survived, the baby is now an adult. Did in any of your research of the author, did she say anything about there being a second book?
I didn't see anything. She did mention that her favorite vampire film right now is The Only Lovers Left Alive, the one with Tilda Swinton.
I love Tilda Swinton.
Me too. So I was thinking we should do a movie this weekend and then like talk about it ourselves.
Yes.
So overall, thoughts about the book? Maybe initial thoughts versus thoughts towards the end of the book.
So this is the first book in a while that I wanted to read, like that I would look forward to reading, that instead of like turning on the TV, I was like, ooh, I got a minute like to kill some time, I want to find out what happens, I want to read it, like that's because I've been in some of our past episodes, if you listened, I was like, I don't know if I'm in a reading slump, I don't know if I'm like depressed, I don't know what it is, but I can't get into any of the books, like it's a me thing, and this one I was not like that, and I don't know if I just kind of got down to the funk I was in, or if the book was that good, but
or like
it
right
did,
time,
like,
right book, right place. I don't think I've been necessarily in a reading slump, but I miss that excited energy that like wakes me up at 2:00 in the morning and I want to read. Like I miss that feeling.
Okay, I've never had that. You wake me up at 2:00 in the morning, and you better be like.
The book, The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, was the last book I read. Prior to that was another vampire book, Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Those two books, and now The God of Endings, are the books that I have had that most like childlike, anxious to continue reading it, and not just read it during the day like a normal person or before bed like a normal person, but like wake up at 2:00 in the morning and read for 3 hours and then go back to bed and then wake up in the morning thinking about it. And
That's funny. I didn't even know you were into vampire novels.
I don't either. I just like good books, and sometimes they just happen to be about vampires.
Yeah.
But I also like just books about monsters, whether that means a person like the father in Just Like Home that we read, where you've got like a human monster, or if it's like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is it like, you know, don't we all kind of feel like there's a part of us that is kind of monstrous?
Not at all, no.
Well, remind me not to tell you all my secrets. I was so obsessed with this idea of her sensing, was it Cernus? Oh, Cernabog, sorry. I think some people say Chernabog and then some people say Cernabog, but if you've watched...
I think I was reading it as like Shrivershinanog.
Well, not only do I read a lot of witchcraft books, so
this is real. She didn't make this up.
No, that's real mythology. It's Slavic mythology.
Okay, see, I thought she just made that up.
No. She didn't make that up. That's real. And it's interesting because a lot of pagan cultures, their gods and goddesses were changed when Christian
Indoctrination.
missionaries, like when missionaries came in and they were like, yeah, this is all good and fun, but we're gonna do some tweaking, and then they all
instead of worshiping Esther and spring, we're gonna call it Easter. And
yeah. And that's like with Cernabog, he is the god of endings, but also the god of light, right? The god of darkness is the god of light. That's
how Agnon, was that his name? Agnon.
Oh yeah, the grandfather's like buddy.
Yeah, he explained it to her that he's like both.
Yes. Yeah, like you can't. Those Christian cultures came in, and instead of understanding duality, they made them like, okay, this is the good one, and this is the bad one, and it's just not that way. That's not how the world is, right? Once that connection or that kind of realization,
epiphany,
happened. Then when she started becoming obsessed with digging the grave, I was thinking there was going to be some sort of rebirth where she now welcomes Cernabog. She's ready for a transformation, and I was like, what's the next step of her evolution? Is she going to like go into some like final form or the next form? And then when Catherine came to her and was like, will you keep Leo over Christmas? I was like, oh, okay. I see where we're going with this. The hole's not for her. It's for Leo.
Because you see, like, her body was doing that while she was sleeping. Like, it was this kind of, sixth sense that she needed to do this. But she didn't know all that with Leo. So it was like, how did her body know that?
Here's what I was thinking of. It made me think of nesting. When women are pregnant, before they even understand what motherhood is going to be like or what to expect, their body starts preparing for a place. And, like, animals do it, right? Like cats.
So she wanted to change Leo before all of that.
Yep.
And didn't know it.
Yeah, before her brain knew it, her body knew it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this book, and then it all kind of
a lot of great characters
wrapped up. Yeah, and I had this whole issue with like the concept of strength, because like in this, it's like it meant she puts up walls and she doesn't get close to people, and she's, to me that's a weakness, not a strength. And
I think that's true, but I think that came from part of her not understanding her immortality as a gift, but her being like, well, everyone's gonna die and the world is terrible, and so I can't get close to him. That was, I think, a mental weakness. The strength in her was her ability to keep going and to protect people.
But she didn't have a choice. She had to keep going.
Right, but she could have just gone and lived in the woods and never interacted if she really wanted to guard herself.
What the hell was Vano?
Vano was like a soothsayer.
Why was his brother a vampire and he wasn't? And like, why didn't his brother change him? And how did the old lady die?
I'm kidding. No, yeah, that's a lot of good questions, but I think the way that she gets away with it for sure is that Anya was young. She didn't understand a lot of what was going on. There was a lot of superstition, a lot of like Vano communing with spirit, like he had this sixth sense. Peroska almost having the same kind of thing, like witch doctor-y vibes. And so maybe she wasn't a vampire, but maybe she was something else. She definitely wasn't fully regular human adorable old lady. She was a witch or something. Let's talk about what's coming up, because we have a little change in our plan. An author named Jenna Adams just sent us each a copy of her book.
And we're like, absolutely. Yeah. We like to read debut novels.
Yes. Can I stray?
I feel like the authors who you see, in Target and Walmart and everywhere, they've got marketing. They've got all that money behind them. And debut novels don't necessarily get that, even though they're fantastic.
Yep.
And so we like to read those. And so we said, yes, we will absolutely read it and review it. And so we are going to hold off on The Handmaid's Tale.
It's an honest coming-of-age novel that explores consent, mental health, and the complex world of teenage sexual politics.
Hey, With 2 teenagers, I can't wait to read that.
There is a warning, though, that there is some suicidal ideations, depression, toxic relationships, and self-harm. So if those are trigger warnings for you, let us read it for you, and we'll tell you about it.
Yeah.
Go to our Instagram, get the recipe, make yourself a little French chocolate pastry, get yourself some Apothic red wine.
This is the recipe that I came up with.
The fermenting process, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. Amazing. If you haven't read it, read it. If you have read it, tell us what you think. This is one of those ones we definitely want to nerd out with you guys about. Okay. Thank you for watching or listening or both. Fan, you do both. You listen to the podcast when you drive, and then you get home and you watch the video.
Well, and they're different because I edit the audio and Noelle edits the video. And so what we choose to take out and leave in is different.
Yeah. Mine are always way shorter because when I go on tangents, I cut none of this is going to make it in. This won't be in the video.
And I just leave all her tangents in to make myself sound really smart.
I love it. All right. Thanks, Amber.
You're welcome.
Bye. Bye.
I guess, considering she's like a Barbie doll down there, you can only go so far with that. Gross.
I mean, yeah, gross.